Let me welcome some people before we get started. Aleph McMahon and Matt Garland from the state of Tennessee, Richard Venable Networks, Andrea Wilcox from Cosby, Jeff Fraser from Arkham. You're going to hear from most of these people today, but I appreciate Jeanette saying what a great idea I have, but me and the mayor of New York, but most ideas that anyone has are taken from somewhere else, and all ideas are only good by the number of people you can get involved in it. And in this case, we were very fortunate to have Bunkie C to lead our cities of service. And what we really started this, and let me give John Campbell, the city manager, credit also, a lot of credit. But what we realized, and John has said for years, that we have the largest group of retired individuals, that these are individuals, you all are individuals that are well-traveled, well-educated, and have major contacts. And the history of Kingsport, we've never tried to capitalize on that. One of the reasons being that the industry that you retired from, whether it be Domtar, Eastman, whatever, were somewhat reluctant to share names because of privacy issues. But fortunately now, they're willing to work with the city to put us together with retired people so that we can capitalize on the vast knowledge that's available to us. We were talking to a couple of you that are in the room about economic development, and everyone has heard economic development. And everyone knows that we work on economic development some. I'm not sure you know to the extent, but I don't think many people know what's involved in recruiting and trying to get people industry to locate here. It is a major, major task. And the more people, the more ambassadors that we can have working for Kingsport, the more help that you can be to us. And the more we can inform you on what we're doing. I bet 5 people in this room has ever walked inside the door of Networks. Probably 10 people in the room even know where Network is. And a ton of your taxpayer money goes to fund networks and economic development every year. The Arkham building. If you haven't had the opportunity to go to Arkham, and you're going to hear from these people today, but that is one of the most fascinating buildings and programs that I think that a city can have. It actually takes people from waiting tables at minimum wage, or pizza flippers at minimum wage, I can't use hamburgers, and get you into a job that you can support a family. And if you haven't been there, I really do encourage you to go up and let Jeff Fraser, one of the staff, show you what those programs are all about. Education, we all talk about 4-year degrees, 6-year degrees, 8-year degrees, but we need people doing skilled labor. I've told this story 1,000 times. When I went to Nashville in 1987, I needed a plumber. I called that morning before I left for work. I had a plumber. I needed to see a doctor. It took me 6 months to get in to see a doctor. Today, I can walk from here and go over right now and see my doctor without an appointment. He'll see me. If I need a plumber, it may take 6 months. So it has changed, and we need to make sure that we're changing Kingsport as the world changes. We don't have a problem at Dobbins Bend High School with the students that go to Vanderbilt, Wake Forest, UTs. What we do have a problem with is we have a problem getting enough general laborers at Domtar and Eastman, AGC, to fill the needs that are needed for the people that are retiring or leaving. So that's kind of what this is all about, is to educate you all what economic development is all about. And I spent a little time on existing industry. Existing industry, in my opinion, is the most important part of economic development. You know, and you're always accused of going out and paying someone that'll bring 20 employees to town, whatever it takes, but we can't visit one of our local industries and see what their needs are. Most of your growth is going to become from your local industry that is here now. When I'm born again, I'm going to come back as a economic development recruiter, because if you, right now, if I just say my name's John Jones and I called Johnson City, Tennessee and said I'm thinking about bringing an industry there with 75, 125 jobs, they're going to pay my airline ticket to fly in, they're going to pay my motel room, they're going to feed me 3 to 5 meals a day. They're going to wine and dine me, and I can get a good 2 weeks out of that. Then while I'm in my motel room at night, I can be writing my letter to the next city I'm going to go to. So I think there's a circuit if you just, because we all do that. And I was in South Dakota yesterday, day before, but there was an article in the paper that caught my eye about the number of cities and counties and the amount of money that they're spending to attract industry. I mean, it's in the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars that you have to pay. You have to give the land, you have to do the training, and you have to decide if you're going to do this, because if you're not going to do it, someone else is. And they're all not winners. It's every bit a calculated gamble. So hopefully by the time your day's over, you're going to know a lot more about what it takes to entice economic development to Kingsport, Tennessee, retail to Kingsport, Tennessee. Retail is a big part. It's not economic development, maybe, but since we depend so much on sales tax in our system of government in the state of Tennessee, retail is very, very important. There's stores that command or demand, however you want to look at it, $30, $35 million to locate in your city. And before you laugh all the way home about that, as I did the first time I heard it, you've got to stop and see what the investment is. When it's just like any business decision, what income can be generated? The Target store is a good example. We spend $1 million of your taxpayer money bringing a Target store to Kingsport, because at the time that was the #1 requested store. But when you look at it on a business deal, what's my return? It took about 2.5 years to get your money back on Target. So we've more than got our money back on Target. So there was people critical of that. Matter of fact, there's people critical of everything. But if you put a $100 bill in everyone's mailbox, 2% of the people would complain. It was turned wrong. But you learn to live with that. But when you get your money back in a short period of time, that's an economic development. That is what you have to look at. And when you're looking out 10 or 15 years, I mean, you don't have a crystal ball. You're making the best decision you can. Most of us remember when the trees were cut and Scott Roller owned Fort Henry Mall. And Fort Henry Mall was the top place in Kingsport. and they have about a 20, 25-year lifespan, and it takes a major renovation. But rather than me be the entire program, let me go ahead and introduce Bucky C. And again, most of you all know Bucky C., probably even as much as I do. And he is a typical example of what the type of people we have in Kingsport who are always volunteering their service to make this the greatest city effort. And if you don't do anything else before you leave here, give Bucky a pat on the back for the hundreds and hundreds of hours that he dedicates to this job. And Bucky, on behalf of the city, I want to say thank you. Have a great day. I've got to go speak to the teachers at the schools. The school summer breaks out, so the teachers start back today. So I'll go over there and I'll be back in good hands. Thank you.
Good morning. Let me get situated here and not drop that off the table. We've changed our schedule just a little bit, so if I get confused, just bear with me. But I want to thank everybody for coming today. And I know some of you have heard part of this. Anyone in here is a member of the civic groups, because I've been speaking to them about Impact Kingsport. But I'm going to just give you an abbreviated version of what I've said previously to kind of fill you in on what Cities of Service is, how we got into it, and where we stand today. And then we're going to hear from several other people who know a whole lot more about economic development than I do. So we'll just get started. Jeanette asked you to please sign the yellow sheets. Please do that. We've got to send you a bill for your breakfast. So make sure you put your name on there. As I said, I'm going to give you a little information about Cities of Service and how Kingsport got involved in that and the development of the plan that we call Impact Kingsport. After that, we'll hear from Jeff Fleming, who is the Kingsport's Assistant City Manager for Economic Development. Jeff is our economic development expert and is going to give you a brief summary, kind of a economic development 101 to put us all on the same basis of knowledge. After that, our city manager, John Campbell, will be speaking to you and will discuss the city's economic development strategy and how volunteers such as yourselves can be involved in the importance of that involvement to the city as we go forward. After John, I think we're going to take a short break, if I remember right. We'll take a short break then, and then after the break, we'll hear from Ilef McMahon, who's right here, who is the Regional Director for Economic and Community Development for the state, for the northeastern region of Tennessee. And Ilef will give us an overview of the state's economic development activities. Then we'll hear from Jeff Frazier. Excuse me. We'll hear from Jeff Frazier, who is the Director of Training and Development for RCAM, which is the Regional Center for Advanced Manufacturing located actually just down the street next door to Domtar. Jeff will talk about how RCAM tailors their classes to business needs and how RCAM can potentially impact or affect Impact Kingsport. After that, I'm going to come back up and just kind of summarize it and go into a little bit of detail of how you can be involved. If you're interested, how you can get involved in this and work with us for the future of Kingsport. This project all started back in September of last year when Mayor Phillips announced that the city was joining the Cities of Service Coalition. He also announced at that time that he had appointed me as a volunteer chief service officer. And I know many of you saw that because I've caught some grief from my fellow Kiwanians about it. City of Service Coalition was founded in 2009 by Mayor Bloomberg of New York. He and 16 other mayors, total of 17, came together to form the Cities of Service Coalition. The basic objective of that coalition is for the member cities to develop strategies to utilize volunteers, to engage volunteers to work on critical city needs. Each of the member mayors agreed to develop a comprehensive service plan and a strategy for meeting a specific need of that city. Work with other mayors and elected officials to accelerate the service plan. They agreed to encourage other mayors to join this national effort and then to support the goals of the Serve America Act. This started out at 17 cities. It quickly grew to 21. Each of these cities were given a $200,000 grant by Mayor Bloomberg and the Rockefeller Foundation to hire a chief service officer to develop an initiative over a 2-year period, a volunteer service plan over a 2-year period. Now, these were cities, as you can see on the slide, like New York, Atlanta, Baltimore. It's interesting to note Nashville was one of them. Nashville was a grant city and received the $200,000. All of these had major initiatives, and all of these cities had more than one. One of the major initiatives from Nashville was the cleanup of the city after the floods in 2010 or 2011. So that was one of their major initiatives. Several of the cities had initiatives concerning education. New York City had a major initiative to reduce the carbon footprint of the city, and I've seen results of some of these, and it's dramatic what they have done. The coalition now represents over 100 mayors with nearly 50 million Americans involved in cities of service. Kingsport is now a member. We're one of the cities. There are 4 cities in Tennessee: Kingsport, Memphis, Nashville, and Chattanooga. Nashville is the only grant city. Nashville is the only city in the state that received the $200,000 grant from the Bloomberg Foundation. Kingsport joins those 3 as the 4 cities in Tennessee as members of the coalition. Now, since Cities of Service was formed on the basis of volunteers working in this city, it was only natural that AARP would get involved. AARP, who is founded on the basis of service. So in 2011, AARP joined forces with Cities of Service Coalition to found the Cities of Service AARP Volunteer Chief Service Officer Initiative. If you remember, the grant cities were each given $200,000 and hired a chief service officer. Note the word, in this case for Kingsport, note the word volunteer. The cities chosen were given a grant of $5,000 by AARP, and these were for cities under 100,000 population. They were given a $5,000 grant by AARP, and that was to be used for program expenses as they developed their specific programs. In May of last year, representatives of the state AARP office came to Kingsport, met with Mayor Phillips and City Manager John Campbell, made the pitch for Kingsport to join Cities of Service, outlined the benefits of it, what was involved with it. I think both the mayor and John Campbell were excited about it, and after some consideration agreed to join Cities of Service. That's a national coalition. This is, as I told you, represents over 50 million Americans. It's a national coalition, so a city of our size of 50,000, that's a pretty good thing to be involved in a coalition of that size. And I think it's given a lot of real good publicity to Kingsport, and various conferences I've attended. Kingsport's name is always right there at the top of what we're doing based on our economic development activities. So I'm very proud of what we've done. Now, in June of last year, the mayor and John Campbell asked me if I would agree to be the volunteer chief service officer. After a lot of thinking about it, particularly with Margot, I decided to do it. The mayor signed the letter of commitment, and we were off and running. And we came into this with the understanding that we would be working on economic development. A lot of the cities chose, as I said earlier, educational initiatives, city cleanups. I think the education initiative was by far the most popular initiatives that the major cities chose. But we came into it with the objective of working on economic development, growing the city's economic base. Now, I'm not in this by myself, now, fortunately. We wouldn't be where we are if I was. We have a team consisting of myself, Jeanette Scalf. Where's Jeanette? Jeanette's outside. Jeanette Scalf, who is the city planner for economic development. Also Morris Baker, and I think Morris has deserted. Morris is outside. Okay. He went with the mayor. Morris went with the mayor. And Morris is the director of grants and higher education initiatives for the city. And then also Bill Anderson sitting there. I think most of you probably know Bill. He's been involved in economic development in the city for many years. So we have a team of 4 that has been working on this. As the mayor mentioned a few minutes ago, Kingsport has one of the largest STEM concentrations in the state. With employers such as Eastman Chemical, Domtar, AGC, and BAE Systems, the region has a tremendous resource of volunteers from which to draw. Many of these individuals are retirees of the STEM companies, STEM employers, and are seeking ways to be engaged in their community. We got together, as I said, working on the initiative that we've entitled Impact Kingsport, and our vision for this program is to engage highly educated retirees in Kingsport to use their many years of experience and business contacts in a proactive strategy to grow Kingsport's economic base. And that's our major objective, attracting new businesses, retaining businesses, and helping existing businesses grow. According to the state, and I think Olive, will confirm that over 80% of job creation comes from existing business. The mayor referred to that earlier. It doesn't come from new businesses, it's primarily existing businesses, and we're putting a lot of our efforts in that area. Now, striving to meet that vision requires recognizing 2 basic assumptions. One is that human capital is one of our region's greatest assets. As we mentioned, the number of retired employees we have in Kingsport, highly educated retirees from the STEM employers. And then that is really not being capitalized. We're not using our retirees in this particular area as we see we can in the future. And then our economic developers work with a wide array of industries when they're recruiting new industries or working with existing businesses. And they're not always experts on all of these different industries they're working with. They do a super job, but they're not always experts, and they're not always experts on a specific product or process. And that's where we think the retirees such as yourself can come into play. Our data says that over the last 5 years, over 1,300 individuals have retired from Kingsport's 3 major industries. That's Eastman, Domtar, and AGC. Our data also indicates that of that group, over 200 are highly educated business executives and engineers. Our vision is by linking these retirees with our economic development staff, it's anticipated that Kingsport will have a competitive advantage in recruiting new businesses new businesses to this area or in the expansion of existing businesses. Now, the mayor went through a little bit of this, but in addition to the available retirees that we have, highly educated retirees that we have in Kingsport, Kingsport's higher education initiative represents a major competitive advantage when you compare it to other cities of comparable size. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the Higher Education Center in downtown Kingsport, as well as the Regional Center for Advanced Manufacturing, Regional Center for Advanced Technology, Automotive Technology, and Health Professionals. This is a complex that Kingsport and all the citizens of Kingsport need to really be proud of. That is a wonderful facility, wonderful campus we have downtown for higher education, and something we should all be proud of. And that will play a major role as we work to expand Kingsport's economic base. By promoting this education infrastructure, we can assure potential businesses of a competent, educated workforce that can meet pretty much any industrial labor challenge that they might have. Our retirees, coupled with this education initiative, can be real valuable in contributing to economic development in Kingsport in a major, meaningful way. Now, Impact Kingsport, that, as we've titled our project, is designed to utilize retirees to assist our city's economic development staff in recruiting new businesses or expanding the current businesses. We envision these retirees, as we bring these retirees in, we envision developing a database where we have information on your education background, your work history, what you did through your work career, developing consulting groups that we will then match with our economic development staff. As we encounter, or as the economic development staff encounters a business interested in moving to this part of the country, interested in moving to East Tennessee, we would then, knowing what that business is, we would try to link an appropriate retiree with the economic development staff. You would be involved in discussions either just with the staff or in some cases with the company. You would be advised of their business plans. You would know what it is they're trying to do. And we would try to find that retiree who is familiar with that particular industry, that particular process, or that particular product. Utilizing your background, your business contacts that you made during your many years of work, to try to work with our economic development staff as they go forward in recruiting businesses. All right, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to come back to this one a little bit later and talk to you a little bit more about how we would hope you could be involved. But right now, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Fleming, who is the Assistant City Manager for Economic Development. And as I said earlier, he's going to do kind of a Economic Development 101.
Okay, so we're in business. Many of you have heard a lot of this before through the civic clubs and so forth, so I'm going to speed through a lot of it. But I do want to touch on a few things just to keep us all on the same page. Earlier, I think Bunky said I was the expert city staffer in economic development. Well, I promise you I'm just one of many. And if I'm an expert at anything, it's the non-traditional part of economic development. So hopefully as we talk a little bit today, you'll be able to discern the difference between those two and kind of set the stage for how you might help. From the very beginning of the history of Kingsport, J. Fred Johnson talked about the Kingsport spirit and about coming together for the greater good and, doing something, being involved in something that's bigger than yourself. And in these days of Occupy Wall Street and accusations of corporate greed and that sort of thing. It's very refreshing to see people now are beginning to re-establish the value of what it means to be a part of something. So thank you for being here and look forward to working with you in the future. Just very quickly, it's important to establish that Kingsport is the largest city and the fifth largest metro in Tennessee. Johnson City is at 198, which makes it the seventh largest. So large enough to have amenities, small enough not to have problems like traffic and crime and that sort of thing. So when you look across the mountains to our adjoining states, we're also the largest city and the fifth largest metro in those areas as well. So while we are politically connected to Nashville and Memphis and places like that, we are culturally connected to many other states in the southern Appalachian region, and we have many of the same amenities. I always say when we're talking to folks from Asheville that we're the sunny side of the Blue Ridge, and if you like Asheville without the extra cost, come over the mountains to Northeast Tennessee. We have long known that Tennessee is a strategic location for business. Logistics is one of the fastest growing areas in Tennessee right now, but it's also a strategic location for residents, and I'll touch a little bit on that in a minute when it comes to recruiting people to live here as well. So it works both ways. We've received many accolades over the past few years. Eastman has been named one of the top places to work in IT. I think that many times when we look at Eastman or we drive by an industrial plant, we think everybody in there is a blue-collar worker, but really they're not. It needs to be broken down by department almost to be able to fully understand what is going on with our economy. Medical economics named Kingsport one of the best places to practice medicine in America, and so again, that's another fast-growing sector that we can take advantage of. And CNN Money and Fortune magazine a few years ago in 2007 named Kingsport one of the fastest for small business growth, and that was based on track record, not potential. So when you look at the large industries around here and you assume that the only way to get a job is to go work for a large employer, remember that most of the growth is going to come from small business in the future. And Andre Wilcox is out here with us today, and we'll talk about Cosby here in just a minute. So for the first, the 80 years of Kingsport's existence, we had 40% of our workforce in manufacturing. It was a city that was built on the theory of interlocking industries. Across the street here at Domtar, where paper is made, was brought across the street here to the press, where books were bound and sold. So we now know what's happened. Now everybody has Kindles, or they have electronics, and so we have to change with the times. And so part of the theory of having the Economic Summit in 1999 was to discuss what our future would be. Was this great experiment that was created in 1917, had it run its course? Was it over? Or are we going to reinvent ourselves and become the continued city that we knew we could be? So what we saw, if you looked at the peak of that chart in manufacturing jobs, that's when Meadowview Convention Center was built. And I know that many of you were around here when Meadowview was built, and we heard the stories about Muddy View, and it looks like a prison, and who's going to want to come to a conference in Kingsport, Tennessee, when they can go to Gatlinburg or something like that. And manufacturing jobs declined after that. So if Meadowview had not been successful, I don't think anybody would have been surprised, because they said, well, everything was working against us at that time. But then we saw education and healthcare take off, and so when you look at the coursework that's available at much of the academic village, it's tailor-made to the available local jobs. So when you hear Jeff Frazier talk a little later, going to replace a retiree in one of the industrial plants is one option, but also going into the education and healthcare arena is another option. So textbook definition of economic development. What is it? Because everybody has a different definition in their mind of what it means. Basically, it is vaguely related to attracting business, industrial growth, home building, or some type of construction. I think most people, when you think about economic development, you think about, let's build an industrial park, let's build a spec building, let's go attract a business, they're going to hire employees, and it will be happy. Well, and I will say that industrial parks and manufacturing I've always heard folks call that the first dollar, and that is a very important dollar because it is the basis for everything else. But there is a whole different part of economic development that can complement that and can work together, and those are what I call the non-traditional methods. And you're going to have this whole presentation so you can refer back to it if you need to in the future. So I'll point out at the very bottom, I remember Steve Kramer, when he was the chairman of the Economic Development Board for Kingsport, would always come around and he would say, economic development is the creation of jobs and wealth. Economic development is the creation of jobs and wealth. Economic development is the creation of jobs and wealth. And so when you take that broad definition, you can see that an economic development board can be so much more than just building spec buildings and industrial parks, although, again, that's a very important component. The government undertakes to meet broad economic objectives, including inflation control, high employment, sustainable growth. Again, all this is textbook definitions. But the common denominator is that we want to influence the growth and restructuring of our community. And we need to be proactive about that rather than just sitting around and waiting for something to happen to us. Let's go make something happen for us. And so that's what we're trying to do here. Traditional economic development, and I've kind of alluded to this already, but a lot of folks call it smokestack chasing. John Campbell reminds us every day that with our industrial heritage, we have to work twice as hard to demonstrate that we're also environmentally sustainable, because people have preconceived notions when they drive by an industrial plant and they assume that if there's smoke coming out of the smokestack that it's not safe to live here, or that the river must be polluted. We know differently. We know differently based on all of the myriad of studies that have been done, but we know that that is also our bread and butter. So we're trying to constantly balance this traditional and non-traditional. Typically, the lead comes to a state, and then the state filters it down to a local area, and then all the locals compete for that one prospect. I often say that it's amazing how much work goes into recruiting one Volkswagen plant, and there's one. So one city's going to get it, one state's going to get it, and one city or one state's going to win, and everybody else is going to try to have to get something else, like the suppliers or something else. So there is a ton of effort that goes into that, and it's a very important part. But there's equally important things that we can be doing to improve our local situation as well. Non-traditional, we basically take a more proactive approach. We figure out a way to go get it. We figure out a way to package our amenities locally, our assets, and go and communicate those to the outside world and let them see what we already know about this wonderful community. So the six major non-traditional economic development initiatives that came out of the 1999 Economic Summit were higher education and the Educate and Grow concept, recruit people, not any people that are educated with income. We wanted to balance our demographics. We wanted to bring folks here that had disposable income and resources. Small businesses and entrepreneurs, leisure, hospitality, and sports tourism, because again, that logistical location, people can come here, use our conference center and our athletic amenities, and then they can spend their money and they can go back home. And then redevelopment, TIF, and pilot to take advantage of all the laws that are available to clean up gray fields or brown fields, like where we are today, for example. We're standing in what used to be a manufacturing facility, and now it is a retail facility and offices and farmers market. So do we just sit back? And I've often used the Bimberg plant in Elizabethton, and I don't mean any offense to our friends in Elizabethton, but how many years has that plant sat there with the windows knocked out right on the main drag of Elizabethton? And do we just wait for that? I mean, is that our fate? Or do we take the future in our own hands and figure out a way to make a better product with what we have available? So in Migrants to Kingsport, we started the Move to Kingsport program, which was one of the non-traditional economic development initiatives. And I see several of our board members out here today, and thankfully for them, one of the things that comes from living in a town with two Malcolm Baldrige Award winners is if you can't measure it, it doesn't count. And they literally wore me out, and I'm proud that they did. I'm glad they did, because they said, you got to find a way to measure it. You got to find a way to measure it. You got to find a way to measure it. And so we put our heads together and realized that if you move to Kingsport, you got to turn your water on, and we control the water. And so we know when you turn in your application for water where you came from, and we know when you turn off your water and go somewhere else, we know where you went. And so over a 5-year period, we have been tracking that data. And so at the end of that 5-year period, we collected up those addresses and those zip codes, and we sent it to a retail consultant in Fort Worth who analyzed those folks, where they came from and where they went. And what they said was, in Kingsport, the fastest growing demographic segment was the primary stable careers. So it was young, ethnically diverse singles living comfortable lifestyles. Now let me caveat that. We were at like 1% 5 years ago. It's 5% now. So it's growing at a 5 to 1 rate. Okay, so it's not a huge part of our demographic, but it's the fastest growing segment of our demographic. So that's important to note. On our secondary was steadfast conservatives. Steadfast conservatives doesn't necessarily mean politically conservative. It just means that, we pay our bills, we don't run up a lot of debt, we're law-abiding citizens, and most of the people in the United States fall into that category. And in Kingsport's case, 22% of our population was in that category, and the folks that have come here in the last 5 years, about 20% of them fall in that category. So it's not growing at a faster rate than we already have, but it is a substantial piece of who we're attracting. And then finally, urban commuter families, which is upscale college-educated boomer families and couples living in single-family detached homes. And many of those are what I would call pre-retirees, boomer families, empty nesters, and they bring disposable income with them because at their peak of their earning years. Where have people come from? When you look at the map, the red areas are the highest areas, so it spans everywhere from Los Angeles to Houston, Dallas, all over Florida, Atlanta, the Carolinas, the Mid-Atlantic with New York and Philadelphia, Baltimore, Detroit, and Chicago. So when you really drill down into this data, you might be surprised to find that the typical Kingsport resident is more akin to New England, the Midwest, and the Pacific Northwest than they are to the South. So if we were to take a poll of this room today, I bet you would find that most people moved here from one of those areas I described at some point during your career. So communicating to people on the outside that you're not moving to Southern Appalachia, that has had no infusion of anybody in years, Kingsport is a melting pot, and we all have benefited from it. So we talked about higher education a little earlier. Let's look at the census numbers. In the 1990 census, which was the latest available data when the 1999 Economic Summit took place, we had 18% of our population that had a college degree or higher. In the 2010 census, 32% now have a college degree. So we have improved our college attainment, which is critically important. The median age went from 42.3 to 43.7. The over 65 went from 21% to 20%. So if we had just let things happen naturally, that number I believe would have gone up, but it actually went down by 1%. So we're always hearing we're one of the oldest cities in the state and that sort of thing. I'm telling you, we're improving on that. Okay, and then median family income, which is a critically important. Remember what I said earlier? Creating jobs and wealth. Went from $30,000 to $51,000, almost $52,000 in median family income. And so you got to have money to be able to spend money. And if you spend money, and if almost a quarter of our economy is built on consumer expenditures, you got to have money to spend. So we have to keep that economy churning locally. It may surprise you to know that now in Kingsport, more than 75% of the workforce is in establishments with less than 9 employees. So you can see the stats there from the 2010 census. We tell folks that because they think that if something happens to one of the major plants, that's all we have. We are much more diverse than that now, and the biggest statement of that is that both Moody's and S&P improved our bond rating because they said that we had more diversification now than we ever had in the past. So in these economic times, Moody's and S&P don't improve bond ratings unless you really earn it. So again, I think that's a great statement of our community. In the hospitality and leisure area, again, I mentioned Meadowview earlier and some of the criticisms that were held, but we've now seen $127 million in spin-off private taxable investment, and that comes straight from the assessment.state.tn.us website, so anybody can go and pull that information. I did not in any way want to be accused of spinning the numbers or adding multiplier effects. So if we spent $22 million to build the conference center, when it was originally built, the increase in 1 year from 08 to 09, which was the last appraisal year, was $22 million. So have we returned our investment? I think we very much have in that situation. The mayor mentioned earlier that retail was something that we were trying to work on. For many years, Kingsport didn't have to do anything with retail because we had service merchandise. We had Montgomery Ward. We were the only place in the Tri-Cities that you had those options because it just kind of fell into our lap because of who we were. We saw that momentum start to shift to the south, and we started losing sales tax dollars, and that hit home in the pocketbook. And again, John Campbell reminds us every day, it's very hard to get momentum, but once you get it, it's very hard to stop momentum. So we're constantly pushing and trying to get momentum in Kingsport so that it can last for many years after that. When you look at this portfolio of places, all of those happened on a redeveloped site. You remember that the Target's on the old Mason-Dixon truck terminal. And you remember that the Eaststone Commons is the old 1971 Kingsport Mall. So rather than always skipping around and finding new greenfields, we also have a strong commitment to fixing what we already have too. So again, it's like my grandmother used to say, all things in moderation. We constantly talk about restaurant recruitment, but local restaurants, again, these folks have come here. Big E's came from New Jersey. The Bagel Exchange came from New York. Sloopy's came from California. So the folks have retired and come here, and they've started businesses. And so that's a way to create personal wealth, is to have your own business. And they've certainly exemplified that. We've not grown one side of town at the expense of another. In downtown area, we've seen $42 million in private taxable investment during that same time period. We didn't just grow Meadowview or grow Eaststone Drive and forget about downtown. And we've had a very strong commitment to providing all the amenities that are necessary to support that continued development. That does not include all of the non-taxable investment like the hospital, all the church renovations that took place on Church Circle, and the educational initiatives, which is another $129 million that have been spent in the downtown area. Again, one of the amenities, the parking garage, is now open, 364 spaces. It's awfully nice to be able to tell somebody now that there are 1,231 free parking spaces in downtown Kingsport. And if I were to put the map up here and show you the footprint of Super Walmart on Fort Henry Drive, it would take up 2.5 blocks of downtown Kingsport. So if you complain about walking 2.5 blocks to get to the business you're going to, it's no different than walking from one side of Walmart to the other. So again, we're constantly trying to get people to think of things a little differently. Farmers market. How on earth is the farmers market economic development, you might ask? Well, the farmers market provides an outlet for local farmers who have small family farms that would not otherwise have the opportunity to potentially keep those farms. They may be pressured to sell those farms, develop them into something else, but it allows them a very tangible income. Ours is the largest in the region, and it operates twice a week, which is something that's very unusual. And then also the Harvest of Hope Community Garden that AARP and the United Way worked on is a very critical part of building community and, again, trying to rebrand the way we think of economic development. The concert series, again, that's really economic development. That brings folks downtown twice a week, every week, all summer long. Feet on the street mean dollars, mean sales. And so many of the downtown businesses that may not have otherwise been able to survive even have thrived as a result of constant initiatives to bring people downtown. I mentioned earlier about our commitment to environmental sustainability and awareness. In the Buxton data that we use, there's a factor called a green index, and it's based on your actual green behaviors, not your intent to be green. Do you actually recycle, or you just talk about it? So when you look at that index, it really blew me away that our household green index is higher than Asheville's, because you tend to think of Asheville being a lot more nature and environmentally sensitive and so forth. But we have very strong green behaviors here. And if you look at all those awards, Eastman just won the Energy Star Award. We won the 2008 Siemens Sustainable Communities Award out in California. We've had, even Trash Busters is something that creates an awareness in kids as the flow of trash and environmental awareness. The Wetlands Project, where we're trying to accommodate all the floodplains in town, and it's really been a very brilliant idea that has made it possible to do the aquatic center, because I didn't think you could mitigate a mitigated wetland. I didn't think it was possible. But because of the innovation, and I know John won't want me to do this, but it's his credit goes to him. now we have mitigated wetlands, and we have an aquatic center under construction in that area. And the environmental folks are now raving about Kingsport, where they used to criticize us for trying to get around the rules. Now they're saying, hey, y'all are being so progressive that you're trying to acquire the wetlands and so that they don't get developed. And we also changed some of our zoning laws, so if you donate your wetlands to us, you don't have to have a setback anymore. Things like that to make it more palatable for folks to become environmentally aware. Aquatic center. Why do we do an aquatic center? Because we like to swim? Not necessarily. What we always are hearing, and again from John reminds us every day, we have got to provide amenities that distinguish Kingsport from any other place, because people can live anywhere they want to live. And if you don't constantly add to that portfolio of amenities, they're going to choose to live somewhere else. And so when we are able to tell these newcomers that we're recruiting that there's going to be an aquatic center and a modern family YMCA, they think, hey, maybe I need to live close to that. Maybe rather than 20 miles down the road, maybe I need to be there. And so we keep adding to that portfolio. Retail recruitment, again, entertainment, we have to provide options for folks that can choose to live here. When we started talking about the theater project with the mall, we constantly said we're not going to provide an economic incentive unless you do something dramatically different. We're not going to provide an incentive to move something from one side of town to another. They came on board with an IMAX concept. Since that time, the Economic Development Board has committed assistance to help pay for the IMAX concept, and news has broken that Frank's Theaters has bought the franchise rights for IMAX for Kingsport. That is something that distinguishes us from other areas around. So again, it sounds kind of frivolous when you first hear about it, but all of these things added together create a very strong impact that distinguishes Kingsport. Across the street on the Bray property, we're looking at doing multifamily development. Again, you think, really? Is that economic development? But providing an option for folks to live downtown, we constantly hear, what apartments do you have available for me to look at? And the last Class A apartments that we had built, I believe, was Brandy Mill, which was in the late 80s. And so many of the folks that we see are moving to North Johnson City. We paid a trip over there and met the managers of the apartments. Guess where they both live? Churchill. The managers live in Churchill. They said, we'd love for you to have an option in Kingsport so we won't have to drive over here to work. And then also many of the folks that work at Eastman or in Kingsport live there on a temporary basis. And then once you live in a temporary basis and you get familiar with your surroundings, chances are you're going to stay there. So we have to have that option available for folks here locally. And this is my second to last slide, John, so you'll be up here in a second. 1999, at the Economic Summit, one of the exercises that we went through was to get together and define the economic development process. And what it came up with was it's a well-oiled can of worms. So that was the outcome of the Economic Summit. We don't talk about that a lot, but it's a well-oiled can of worms because we all do something differently, and it's not a process that you can chart real easily, but it seems to work. And this is the graphic that came out of that. And Jeanette, I don't even think you've seen this one.
I haven't.
But it was, at that time, we talked about the Economic Development Partnership of Kingsport. Local government has a role. Community and neighborhood has a role. And if you can't read that fine print, it says Kingsport Tomorrow, Kingsport Housing and Redevelopment Authority, the Downtown Kingsport Association, Model City Coalition. All of them have a role in economic development in some way or form. State and region, which is more traditional, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And then the business community, which is the chamber. If you think about many of the partnerships I described earlier, most of them flow somehow through the chamber. So again, we have a strong partnership. So that leads me to where I believe we are today, which is a network of partnerships. That's the way I would describe economic development in our area now. John's going to come up here in a second and talk about this, but when Networks was created, Richard Venable was mayor of Sullivan County, and I remember we were all sitting together talking about Blount County and how they had a Blount partnership. And the reason they did that was because Maryville and Alcoa, two cities in the same county, sound familiar? Two cities in the same county. Alcoa had no land. Maryville had no land. Blount County had all kinds of land. Maryville had resources. Alcoa had resources. Blount didn't have as many resources from an infrastructure standpoint. So it made sense to pool your resources and share the revenue. And so the model was built based on if a prospect came in, they did not want to distinguish, I'm the city manager of Alcoa, I'm going to show you an industrial site in Maryville. It didn't matter, because at the end of the day, the cost of doing economic development and the rewards that come from economic development are based on formula-driven methods down there. And so that's what the Networks partnership was built on. So we realized that Kingsport didn't have much land, but we had a lot of infrastructure, and we had the ability to provide infrastructure. Bristol, same way. Sullivan County had a lot of land. And so that's why Networks was created the way it was to help leverage that partnership. Now, it gets a little confusing, because if you're from Kingsport, and you're constantly saying, well, what's going on here, what's going on there? There's a ton of work going on at the Networks area that you may not hear about, but it's being done in a forum that's building that regional approach that's going to provide benefits down the road. And not too long ago, Johnson City, Jonesboro, and Washington County followed in that same suit and did the same thing over there. So we look for more of that kind of thing in the future, and who knows, maybe one day we'll have a Tri-Cities regional type of arrangement where we actually share in costs and revenue like that. So John, I'll turn it over to you at this point if you want to.
And before John comes up here, I have to make an apology. Richard Venable, when I introduced the speakers a few minutes, as I said, we've kind of changed our schedule around a little bit, and it does not take much to confuse me. So I unfortunately left Richard off. Richard, I apologize for that. Richard is Chief Executive Officer for Networks, and he'll be speaking to us after the break.
Thank you very much, Jeff. As always, he does a great job of talking about a lot of the great things about Kingsport. And one of the things that I wanted to highlight, and Jeff has handled this very well, is I have always been a big believer in a comprehensive approach to economic development, which really means that you're not only looking at industrial or manufacturing recruiting, but you really have to pay attention to all these kinds of things: small business entrepreneurs, hospitality industry, second biggest industry in Tennessee, something that we do very well here. Even residential development, big issue. The reason for that is because, one, having spent most of my career in Johnson City, we were not an industrial town. We were more of a service-based economy, and so we understood the benefit of the comprehensive approach in trying to develop those particular aspects of it. Also, if you look back in the 80s, when people started talking about the global economy, or America went to a service economy, whether you like it or not, that really played into that hands, where you really were more of a service type economy or medical related. And so there was a lot of development there. So it happened that way. Also, as a budget person, having done budgets since '79 in local governments, like Jeff pointed out earlier, this is a sales tax driven state, so you really have to pay attention to that type of income that comes to a city. And it's something you can't ignore from the property tax standpoint. One of the things that we were really struggling with, I know when I got to Networks in 2005 or whatever, one of the first presentations I made to the Economic Development Board, I mentioned residential development. They all kind of looked at me, why are you interested in that? Well, if you look back over the previous 10 years and you looked at comparison to one of our neighboring cities, you would find that they gained in property tax almost $200,000 a year just off of single-family residential development. And we were losing residential development, and that was really causing us a lot of trouble. It still causes us problems today. One of the things Jeff alluded to, we really need Class A apartments in this town. I mean, when we went to the Havens to look at it, and we asked, who are the people that are living here? Of course, first off, they said, well, a lot of medical-related people. Secondly, Eastman, young professionals. Why were the young professionals living there? They had no choices in Kingsport. As co-ops, they might live in Brandy Mill, get a job at $70,000 plus a year. They wanted something better. We didn't have anything better. And that's what we're still struggling with. We have one local company here that has like 20 plus expats living in Johnson City, because there's no places for those people to live here. And so that's part of what we're struggling with, because if you got young professionals that are coming in, if they start to live here, they'll probably stay here. They'll probably meet their spouses if they don't already have one. and have a reason to stay here. So that is important to the base. It also feeds retail development, the restaurants. They all look at rooftops. Rooftops are very critical in terms of those types of things, even though Jeff has developed an excellent relationship with a company called Buxton. We can do things, very sophisticated demographics and drive times and those kind of things that help a lot, but we still have trouble competing against just looking at rooftops. There's people see where rooftops are, and that's where I ought to put my restaurant or I ought to put my retail store. But we're coming back in that particular area. I put this slide up there just to say that we do believe in the comprehensive approach, but my task here today is really to talk more about the industrial and the reason that you all are here. And thank you so much for participating in this particular session. This is something that means a lot to me. I don't know that I would have appreciated this as much if I hadn't grown up here, hadn't been around people all my life that I looked up to that were really brilliant people. Was influenced to go into engineering because there's such an engineering base that's here, just what you were expected to do when you got out of high school. So many of your buddies were in that particular area, and knew what kind of intellectual capital we had in this town, but also saw from the other perspective, living 20 miles away, how little we did in terms of promoting what we had here. You could tell as you looked from an economic development standpoint that it was kind of easy to be complacent in Kingsport because you had a major company that's employing 15,000 people. They pay great wages. They pay great benefits. It's pretty easy to be complacent. You don't think about what you have to do for the future, and then, of course, things change, and you have to change with it and all. But one of the things that is really important is while we do believe in the comprehensive approach, it's kind of stupid to ignore what your strengths are. And we have some really strong areas that we have really not promoted anywhere outside of Kingsport. And that's what we're trying to change to some degree, and also by identifying people like yourself. You could argue 4 points that we have that other places don't have in the state. We're the greatest concentration of engineers in the state of Tennessee. That's very important in today's world in terms of high-quality jobs. We have the greatest industrial infrastructure in the state, maybe minus Memphis and all. And that's a long ways off. And we're in a very admirable position here. We have tremendous industrial support services. And I'm talking about things like Jacobs, Brock, the Tennessee Electric, Tennessee Industrial. And if you think about it, and it didn't occur to us at first, but thinking about this 2 or 3 years ago, when you saw the transition of these companies, where A&L may have been a company that really cared a lot, took a lot of their effort around Eastman, and probably didn't feel like they had to go anyplace else. Well, Brock, being a national company or worldwide company, they took a different approach. So they not only have 1,500 plus people that work here at Eastman, primarily, they have another 1,300 they manage from here in 6 or 7 other states in the east. This is the eastern headquarters of Brock. So it kind of changes their perspective. When Tennessee Electric changed hands, Greg Bowling bought that, the recession hit. By necessity, he had to start looking for other things to do. He's even got a wind turbine crew. He's worked on the major job of silica development for solar at Clarksville. He's worked on the DuPont plant in Charleston area. So, they're spreading their wings, but this is home. So this is the base that they offer. And then, of course, you look at Jacobs. Quite frankly, and I don't know what caused the particular swap out between Fleur and Jacobs, but Fleur was being managed out of Greenville, South Carolina. Jacobs takes over. Jacobs is a fast-growing company. They send in 20 people to Kingsport to live and manage it from here. I think that's a very important step. So they become kind of a basis for industrial construction jobs here. Another aspect, of course, is I mentioned industrial infrastructure, but also international experience. Can you name another town in Tennessee that has probably 200 or 300 people that have had significant time experience overseas, like Bunkie C, and I'm sure there's many others in this room that I don't know for sure that what your experience has been. In a global economy, that's really critical. And my point of all this is the fact that, if we don't tell our own story enough and this can happen from you and your personal relationships. You have all these assets here that we don't talk about because you're used to them. You grew up with them. And so we've got to do a better job with the state, of course, informing them of what we have. But at the same time, we certainly want to take advantage of that as much as we can, because we still have a chance to compete for manufacturing. How everybody says you've got to have manufacturing jobs, you've got to have industrial jobs. It's not that we don't want to diversify, we do, but at the same time, we're crazy if we don't utilize those strengths that we do have here. Other examples of when we went down to the plant yesterday, they actually don't spin the yarn. This is a carbon fiber company. They don't spin the yarn there. They take the tow, if you will, already prepared, then they go through chemical processes to basically turn it into carbon fiber. Their plant that they plan to put somewhere in the South, they will actually spin it, and they did mention that it was a wet process. And it sounded very similar to me. I wasn't sure, but it sounded very similar to me what takes place in the filter tow plant at Eastman. We already knew that they spun. We'd seen a photo. If you've gone to the website, you've seen a photo. We'd already done our research. We knew that Brock was supplying a lot of the filter tow workers to Eastman now. We had a cadre of people that already were in that business, if you will. And these are little things that you look for to try to say what's going to differentiate you between the competitor. And right now it's between us and the South Carolina city. In my history in 30-some years of economic development in northeast Tennessee, I don't know that we've seen a bigger prospect when you talk about it from a capital standpoint. First two phases, $350 million, ultimate $1.5 billion. That's pretty significant. So we're in the game. It's something that takes a lot to get in there, but I can't emphasize enough the non-traditional view of recruiting. So much of my career, the prospects would just keep coming as America located other plants or satellite plants, and the industrial recruiters would take those and they would work those. Now you don't get that many prospects. Even before the recession hit, you don't get anywhere near the prospects you might have gotten in the 80s or 90s. I think it might have been mentioned on an earlier slide, or maybe it was at the bottom of that slide we were going to, that when the state gets a prospect, typically what happens is they send it out. They send out a summary of that prospect to 95 counties. I mean, they have no choice but to try to be fair to people, unless the company that's interested says, I don't want to be anywhere but East Tennessee. But a lot of times it's just a wide open thing. Well, if it went to 95 counties in Tennessee, do you not think it went to 300 other counties in Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Kentucky, Virginia? And that's what you face. Well, already you're at a tough competition if you're trying to deal with all these other cities that are out there, many of which have cheap land. We don't have cheap land here. It's very expensive to prepare. Some have better utilities. Not a whole lot have a better utility situation. So you're always better off if you have a relationship and you can develop that relationship and work from that relationship to get to a particular company and all. And that's really part of what we're trying to do with interesting people like yourself to be involved. All of you have developed specialties, especially fields that you're in over the years. You've been members of your associations. You've gotten to know other relationships. When I talk to somebody that I know or if I hear somebody I've just met random and they start talking about what they do or where they work, it's just a natural thing to start asking them a bunch of questions, about what your future is, what your plans are. Do you have any plans to expand? Do you need to be somewhere else, and those kind of things. That's more important than you realize, because if you can get a direct connection to somebody, you may avoid the 95 counties, or the 3 or 4 other states that you're having to compete against. A lot of times when you have that direct relationship, you don't have to put so much on the table in terms of incentives. I cringe every time I have to put an incentive out there. That hurts to do that. I mean, it really does. But unfortunately, we're in an era where you have to do that more and more, and you try to be as guarded as possible about that. But I still think that there's a lot of cases. I know we had a situation about 2 years ago, and we were talking about the incentive that we were going to give this particular company, And to the credit of networks, they had done an excellent job of identifying who the competition is. And so we knew, once we found out who the competition was, we were able to see what their labor situation was. And we knew that their hourly wage was going to be at least $1 higher per person, per hour. And so if you started looking at that, the incentive that was being offered, you didn't have to give as much incentive because you could really go to that particular, say, well, what's more important to you? The workforce is going to cost you this much versus, paying more on the long term. You might get an incentive on the front end, but is it going to help you in the long term in terms of your workforce? In terms of relationships, it can be a lot of different things, and this is the value of the existing business approach or focus. When we talk about existing business, and you say 80% new jobs come from existing business, let's take that as that's not just a case of businesses that are in Kingsport that give us expansion. I mean, that's great. We certainly encourage that. We work with anybody that wants to do that. But it can be their relationships with other companies. Who do they supply? Who supplies them? If you're paying attention to those kinds of things, or those are where you get a lot of information where you can go directly to somebody or you can be ahead of somebody. I know it's extreme. I use this example some. But I know Eastman for years has had a representative to P&G, a direct representative of P&G. It could be that they don't have all access to all the information, but P&G apparently decided they had to have at least one toothpaste plant in America. And so they could put their premium brand there. Otherwise, they'd shipped it overseas or to Mexico. Well, they have to be close to sand. Where do they end up? Marshtown. $40 million plant, maybe 100 workers, not a great number of workers. We're not that much further than the sand pits than they are. There's a lot of sand in toothpaste for those that, I didn't know this until 5 or 6 years ago, but there is a lot of sand in toothpaste. So that's where they ended up. They're one place in America. And, here, what I'm saying is, and I don't know that the Eastman rep had any really direct ability to say that, but that's, where you have somebody that calls and builds a relationship with a company like that, whatever you can take advantage of, because that one is a case where if you'd had direct knowledge, maybe you go to them before they even put it out to a consultant to look at. They just say, well, this is a good place to go. We can go there and all. The targeted recruitment. One of the things that happened under the new administration, and I don't know, Aleph may be pointing this out. I don't want to take away his thunder, but I thought some of the things that happened that were really great was the fact that the administration said we're going to put a lot of emphasis on existing business because really you do get your greatest number of jobs out of existing business. 2, we're going to really look at the cluster approach. And Ross Kingdom and Bill Anderson and other people that work with their group really have done a lot of research over the last 5 or 6 years in terms of this cluster approach. Well, when the state decided that, if you go to their cluster and you can go to their website, one of the 6 clusters that shows up is plastics and chemicals. And there's about 3 logos there, and who's got the biggest logo? Eastman. So, I mean, it really plays to our area. The third thing was really development of a strategy for the regional area. And Aleph will tell you more about the regional areas, but we have one in Northeast Tennessee. Well, hopefully with that strategy, they can see the assets that you have here, and you start to prepare that strategy around these assets so that we'll get more focus on those strengths that I mentioned on the front end. What we can, the fact we have a great source of engineers, we have a great source of infrastructure, support services, those kind of things. That's never been in a regional strategy that I've seen. And I've been working in the marketplace over 30 years and all. So ideally, that becomes part of that regional strategy so people know more about what we have here as assets and all. Trying to think if there's anything else you want. Well, one other thing that's also important, I think, is and you're going to hear more from Jeff Frazier. We're very pleased that we have RCAM, and I think some of you may find yourself not being so interested in working directly with a particular client that may come involved, but maybe being involved in the training process, because workforce development is so huge anymore, and particularly in specific skills. It's one of the things we heard at the plant we were at yesterday. A lot of concern about their workforce there. They'd been there about 25 years and really didn't see the kind of development of workforce that we're talking about here. We actually got to meet with the HR director, who is really the HR director for the U.S. for this particular company, and workforce will be huge. And this particular company hires, for instance, at the gold standard of Work Keys program. And that particular thing, in talking to the state and preparing for this particular company, we've got 1,400 certified people in the gold standard already in this region. That's a pretty good workforce to have available. And Eastman hires at the platinum level. And Eastman, we'd already talked to the Eastman rep, and he had told us that basically they don't have enough jobs for even those that are qualified at the platinum level. And this is important information, because this is part of what this company was concerned about. Are we going to be able to compete against Eastman for jobs? And we, of course, reassured them, said, well, Eastman's very selective. We don't think you'll have a problem. And all of our research since then has borne that out, that we have a very good situation in terms of workforce. That doesn't mean we don't need to start getting better and better. But I think Jeff is going to talk to you about the opportunities that are there to help mentor or train people in what is a great facility, whether you're in the electromechanical lab or the control lab, the PLC lab, and those kind of things. So they've got some great facilities that some of you may enjoy that particular aspect of it and all. Can't say enough about the intellectual capital we have in this town. It's something that I've seen all my life. It's something that looking from another side, I wouldn't want to be competing against if the town is really taking advantage of that. And that's something we're trying to promote, is the idea that we take advantage of this greatly. And you might say, as retirees, one of the things we said to the commissioner of ECD when we first met him was, this is a strong engineering town, because we knew that was important in terms of quality jobs. And we threw out a number. We didn't have an actual basis for this. It's our best swag, I guess you would say, is that we had 500 retired engineers in this region. Commissioner of ECD, who was a venture capitalist, his eyes got wide open. He said, can you give me a list of those engineers? Because he knew how tough it was to find that kind of technical talent for a startup company. Maybe people that don't, you're not having to pay a full salary to. Maybe they're part-time. They could be advisors on contract basis, those kind of things. And that's part of what we're trying to do, is develop that list of engineering science talent, so we'll be able to follow up with the commissioner and say, yeah, we can produce that, or we can show you that that's there and all. I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have, because I don't want to go beyond the time limit. I'm like I'm past it. Any questions anybody has specifically before we take the break? One thing I'll just advise about it, industrial recruiting by its nature, I mean, what are we at, Richard? 25 state prospects at most this year? I mean, it's not something that happens every day. It's something that comes, sporadically at times. It's something that, in your specialty, it may not happen, but every 2 or 3 years. I mean, quite frankly. And what we want to do is make sure we have the data, see what your interest is. We're glad to sit down. One of the things that Jeanette will be doing is spending individual time with each of you that want to participate, to just kind of find out what you participated in over the years in your jobs, who you might know. And it's not a case of, some people would say, well, I've been out 7 or 8 years. I really don't know people in the industry like I used to, but I bet you know somebody in the plant that you mentored, somebody that you trained as an individual that you're still seeing occasionally. Maybe you meet for lunch or those kind of things. I know my father-in-law, he was retired 30-some years, and he still had 1 or 2 lunches a week and all those groups still had people that were still working at the plant that he still enjoyed talking about his career in chemical engineering and all. And so those kind of things can really help and all in this process. Any other questions anybody has? Everybody ready for a break, I guess?
Everybody's ready to get up and move around.
Thank you, and I apologize for having to change the schedule around some, but we've got some other economic development things coming up here.
Thank you, John. Thank you, sir.
Together in partnership. So as I look out amongst you all right here, please understand. Whoa. Thank you. I know I look much better now, don't I? Please understand that when you grow up in Washington, D.C., like I did, I only lived there until I was about 5 years old, and then I moved to Washington, D.C. And please understand that when you grow up in Washington, D.C., and then after I got out of the Army and I came back and I went to graduate school, undergraduate school, and finished up college, had a couple of careers, I didn't know what the soul of a community was all about, really. It's everybody against yourselves there. I mean, it's really kind of you're out for number one, and the only sense of community that I had was the little community I lived in. It wasn't near like this, and it wasn't the kind of thing that you would want to raise your family in. It was for young, upwardly mobile singles that were going to be there for a little while and then go back home. That's basically, it was a very transient kind of atmosphere. Then, for some reason, I got real smart, and I sold my home and got my 2 cats and my horse, and I came down here to Tennessee. Was not married at the time, and met my wife down here, and I've never looked back. And I really am blessed to be able to work in a community and to be able to work in a region as East Tennessee and Northeast Tennessee has here. So, coming from my perspective, I hope that you all know how truly blessed that you are. Now, having said that, from my perspective, I also want to look out and say thank you. Thank you to the volunteers that come to the table. Y'all could be doing something else. You really could. I mean, there's a real brain trust of community service and commitment sitting here in this room. And I really appreciate you coming to the table. Because as John Campbell said on several occasions, and some other folks have said, and Bunky said it, and my friend Richard Venable, who is one of my mentors in this business, has said that on many occasions that you can't do it as a lone ranger. You got to work together. Now, having said that, I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to bring you the state's perspective of what Governor Haslam has brought to this administration and his idea of working together. And then I'm going to kind of open it up to real-life experiences and just kind of share some of the things that we've done across the state that actually fit into the plan to be able to be a partner at the table with such a wonderful community as Kingsport and Sullivan County. Now, having said that, I would be remiss if I did not say that we don't do this alone. I said we did this in partnership. And I am blessed to have an incredible staff. We've got a planner there named Stan Harrison that works with rural development and works with all the different counties up here in the Northeast and rural development and some other rural issues. Then I have 2 business development consultants that are just outstanding and are second to none. One is here right now. Matthew, please raise. Matt Garland. He handles Sullivan County up here, and you all are very familiar. In fact, when I was county mayor, Matt was my 3-star person at the state. So he's been there for a while, and we really appreciate it. The other person we have is Alicia Summers, and I don't know if you really remember Alicia, but she was with the Net V RITA for years, and she's an outstanding economic professional, and she is actually on calls this morning with some clients and couldn't be here with us, but Matt and I are here, and we're thrilled to be here. Now, I got to work this thing. Okay, let me make sure I do this right. There were 4 different things that we wanted to look at in Jobs for Tennessee plan, and I'm just going to go through these pretty quickly and then let you know how we worked it into the Northeast. 4 things we wanted to do. Strategy 1, prioritizing key clusters and existing businesses. John Campbell went over that. He talked about the different key clusters, and one of them was plastics and chemicals, which is up here. Another is pharmaceuticals and nutraceuticals. Another is automotive. And does any of that sound familiar? Absolutely. We are blessed to be able to have a real solid presence in all three of those clusters alone. Not to mention educational, with the fine educational institutions we have up here, from the 3 or 4 private schools to the tech centers, to the state centers, technology centers, to ETSU, and to Northeast State Community College. Second was establishing regional job base camps. I'll get to that. I'm going to come back to that in just a second. Third is recruiting business, reducing business regulation, trying to work smarter, faster, bigger, cheaper. That's what we're trying to do. Because why? Because global economy dictates that that's the way that we need to work. And we've been trying to make it easier, more friendly for businesses to locate here. And that's very, very important. And we've done that this past year. This is the first. We're into our 19th month of this administration under Governor Haslam, and we've gotten some key legislation that's been passed this year, so we feel that we're on the way of reducing some of the business regulation that's been kind of an encumbrance on people that are looking to locate it here, as well as folks that are already here that are looking to expand. And the fourth is investing in innovation, of course, with the RCAM, with the regional accelerator that we have out of ETSU, and the different business incubators that we have in this region up here. We are blessed to be able to have those folks here. Jeff Fleming is here, and Jeff Fleming and also Jeff Frazier. I'm looking right at him, and I called him Fleming. And we, sorry, brother. And but I've met with both of them on a number of occasions, and I never cease to learn something new from each one of them. And we really appreciate you absolutely having the commitment that you need to move this community forward. Thank you for doing that. And the ultimate goal is the governor's goal of making Tennessee the #1 state in the southeastern United States for high-quality jobs. These are some of the key initiatives, and this thing doesn't have a pointer, so I'm just going to say some of the things that we've had to do. Of course, when the governor first came in, we had we needed to cut $1 billion out of the budget. And why? Because that was the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, the ARA money. It was going away. You can't take on and count monies that's not going to be there again. So we had that billion we were looking at, and we ended up cutting about $400 million more. So it was $1.4 billion that we cut out of the budget, which means that we had to go into an austere mode of doing business across the state. We ended up cutting our staff by 42% at ECD. All the departments did, but I'm just telling you that ECD had to do it. Now, at that time, I was Assistant Commissioner of Labor and Workforce Development. We had 6 months, like all the other departments, to put together their plan. ECD did it in 6 weeks, and they were the first ones to do it. So they they made the benchmark for the rest of the state departments to follow. Anybody can tell you, and especially you all that know real life experiences in the manufacturing segment, that you cannot cut nearly half your people, and produce more using the same job model. You got to change the job model. So in his listening tours going across the state, the governor came up with some ideas, some key points, listening to manufacturers, listening to the company representatives, listening to the workers, listening to the customers of the companies, of some of the good ideas and some of the bad things were happening, some of the better things that they could make better. And in doing that, came up with a plan. And so we had to change the business model, and I'm going to get to some of that in just a second. But one of the things we wanted to note was back in 2010, we had hit a recession in 2007. The jobs started going down. Then we started building back up. 2010 hit about 2008 level. And then in 2011, even reducing our staff 42%, we actually created more jobs than we did in the previous year, which is excellent. But one of the things that doesn't get looked at a whole lot is cost per job. How much does it cost in incentives for the state to do business to be able to create jobs? We dropped that dramatically, over half. That's important. That's really very important, because that means we got more bang for our buck. And that's your money. That's taxpayers' money. So that we feel very blessed to be able to have done that and still created the number of jobs that we did. This kind of gives you from 2007 when the recession hit in, and then you see it goes down and then it goes back up, and we're well on our way of going to the next level. Now look, this is very telling. This is southeastern United States, and this is private job segment. You look at Louisiana and you look at Florida, you expect that. after the hurricane. They've been building back. You see where the number of jobs have increased. The only other one that's increased more than us is Kentucky. And I can tell you right now, Kentucky, Virginia, and South Carolina are, and John Campbell will tell you this, are extremely competitive. They are competitive. They are brutal sometimes in their competitive mode. So they will absolutely go out there and do their homework, and so we need to do the same. But you can see that we're sitting pretty well. One of the factors, and I wanted to say this now because if I don't, I'll forget it, and I don't want to forget it. One of the other factors that we need to really realize and what we're doing is makes us attractive. One of the things you would think of is that we don't have a state income tax, right? I mean, that's a good, attractive thing. There's only a few states that don't. That puts us up there. We also have an incredible quality of life. We also are within 1 day's drive of the 75% of the population of the continental United States, which really helps us in locale for transportation for other industries that are looking to export across the state lines. But the other thing that we have is our debt load. When companies are looking at us, we rank number 1 in the nation out of 50 states in debt load per capita. We don't carry a whole lot of debt. We're only one of 3 states in the whole United States, of all the states, all 50 states, we're one of 3 that pays for their roads as we go. We don't carry a debt load on that. We don't have the money, we don't pave it. I mean, that's pretty much it. And for the last few years, with the tractor trailer industry, the trucking industry, transportation industry, we've ranked number 1 in our road system in the United States. Now that says a lot for doing business here. So don't think that that's not looked at. This is our team, one of our recruitment team. This just kind of puts faces to the names. Yes, there are people in Nashville, and they help us out. And one of the things that we were always talking about as we go down is the incredible team that we've got there. Most of these people, in fact, I don't know anybody on this team in these guys, and some of them have switched around. Our chief of staff just left and went into the private sector, and we've got a new chief of staff, Will Alexander, who's an attorney by trade and works with Commissioner Haggerty. But this kind of gives you some of the faces of what we've done. Some of the recruitment that we've done, the annual, SACE Japan annual meeting that we had, dinners at the governor's residence. Those are some of the dinners that they had from different segments. They have people in from industry from different segments that will come in, different clusters, and talk to the governor and come up with business strategies to help their segments. Out-of-state recruitment, new marketing materials, which we've gotten out, new site selection consultant newsletter, just some of the things that we wanted to do and we've implemented. Fast Track, this is very important. Now, Fast Track's been around for years, really has. It's been around for decades. But traditionally, what the Fast Track money has done is gone to 2 things, training and infrastructure. Water, sewer, electric roads, fiber cable, gas lines, rail. Those are the traditional infrastructures. But it's always been up to the property line of the company you're helping. For the first time ever, we've not only increased from about $54 million in the fund to $80 million in the fund, the total fund for Fast Track. We have included the Economic Development Fund, which is a great fund to be able to help other segments of costs that have that companies face when they want to expand. For instance, temporary office space. Just met with a company yesterday that was talking about, or talked to them on the phone, met with them last week, that was talking about increasing their manufacturing space. But in order to do that, they're going to have to take some of their space inside their building that they have for the office space and take it out and then put their office out in a trailer out in the parking lot for right now until they can get that built out. Now, that's before there were not monies to do that. Be able to relocate machinery. There was not monies there before to be able to transport machinery out of state into that facility. Different kinds of funds like that. It's never been there before, and the legislature passed it this year, and that is going to be a huge help for us. So we feel very good about that. These are our regional teams. Now I'm going to talk about this a little bit. There are 9 regions. There are also 9 development districts. That is not an accident. That was done on purpose. We felt like that if you're going to work in partnership together, you ought to be able to meld in and fit in with your partners in that region. So the 1st Tennessee Development District, that is our Northeast Tennessee region. Okay, East Tennessee Development District, that's their region in the red. And it follows all throughout. And we have there's 9 regional directors. Now, why do we do that? That comes back to John Campbell made a really good point, and I'm glad that he brought this up. It used to be the way that you did business in Nashville. And Richard will tell you this because Richard served in the legislature, and he and I actually served as county mayors at the same time. And I've gone to Richard on a number of occasions to get things passed in Nashville. And honestly, Nashville's where you got to get it done. I mean, and he'll tell you that. But it used to be that everything that you did had to be going to Nashville. Well, where is the furthest point away from Nashville in the state of Tennessee? I think you're just about sitting in it. It's about 4.5 hours away. And coming home, you lose an hour. So you're talking, you know, if you go down there for a day meeting, you're talking about a long day. Take a couple people with you to help you drive because it's a long way down there. So what the governor wanted to do, he realized this. What the governor wanted to do was to decentralize the government being in Nashville and let it go regionally to have these regional offices to open up. And that's why Alicia and Matt and myself are here. We're here to help be a partner with you all. One of the things that I've always heard is that you know you've got to work in partnership, and this is absolutely true, especially the way that business is done today. Back in the early 90s, and Richard can remember this, and I can too. Back in the early 90s, a lot of businesses, a lot of site consultants would go to the conventions, the economic development conventions, their organizations, their conferences that they would have. They'd set up booths, and you go and you visit booth to booth to booth to booth, and it was personal touch. Now it's all on the internet. Now you are considered and eliminated before you even know you are a heartbeat in their mind. Your community can be just considered, then it can be eliminated. And John was absolutely right when he stood up, and Jeff, I believe, brought up this point too. At first, when a prospect comes in, it can come into a community in many different ways. Sometimes it comes through just the contacts. They go out and they hire a site consultant, and the site consultant will merely rely on their own contacts. Who have they done business with before? If it's not been up here in Kingsport, you don't have a prayer. They'll go somewhere else where they have that contact. Sometimes it'll be somebody at the state. The state will get it, and then we fan it out. Sometimes the cities will get it because they have a sister company here. They have a relationship. There are many different ways that a business will get interested into this community, into a community. And at first, the first initial reaction is they've got this tick list of all these bullets that they need. They need this, that, the other, you know, all the infrastructure, the educational system. They need to be near the transportation. They need to be near a free foreign trade zone. They need to be near all these things. Then as soon as that's done, then they go down into the phase of cutting you out. And they look at everything. They're not looking for reasons that you're a wonderful community, because every community out there thinks they're wonderful, and in many ways they are. They're looking for anything to cut you out of the picture. And this was brought home very astutely by a speaker that was at the plenary session back at the Governor's Conference in Economic and Community Development last year, and I see someone back there. I see Jeanette back there shaking her head. She was at the same thing. It was kind of a justification. We all knew it, but we didn't want to really think about it. But at this session, this guy gets up, and he's an international business consultant. There was 3 of them, right, Jeanette? And they were all talking about this. And he said, look, we go on the internet, and we go into a community, and we pull up the media. And we look at your radio stations, your television stations, and your newspapers. And we peruse there, and we go, and we pull up economic development articles. And we see if your county commission and your city councils support your local economic development efforts. Or are they fighting? Or are they trying to cut your budget? Because you don't want to go into a community if they're fighting amongst themselves. Because what kind of harmony are you going to have inside of a community if they're sitting there constantly bickering and cutting each other's budget and it's all politics? And you don't want to get a part of that. That is a good way to eliminate yourself. So again, you can be eliminated just right from the get-go. Well, that brings me to this point. You know, you can beat each other up, and I used to say this as mayor, you can beat each other up all you want behind closed doors, but when you come out, by golly, you better be holding hands and singing Kumbaya. Because if you're not, another community is. And that is a great thing about any community. Not everybody always gets along. When, you know, you don't always get along with your family. But when it comes to supporting each other, you're family, and you will get along. And what you all are doing here as volunteers is helping support your family, to help bring you along. You've stayed here, you've worked here, you're retired here now, and you want to give back. You're paying it forward. And that is an important thing, and it's important for your city and your county and your economic development entities to work together in harmony and do that. And that's one of the things that you all do very, very well. There are three emphases that we want to make sure that you understand in all of these regions. The first one is we put a real emphasis on recruiting new businesses. That's where they're looking at. It's a global economy. We're looking all over the place. And every time that we get a spec sheet and it's sent out, I make sure that Alicia and Matt get it. I make sure I make phone calls. And follow-up phone calls. We make sure that your communities know about it as soon as we get it. The other thing is we have a significant support from the entrepreneurial efforts here with the regional accelerators that we've got, plus some of the business development centers that we have. Cosby, Andrea, is a huge asset up in this community. It's a huge asset. And as you go forward, you learn a little bit more. If you don't know a lot about Cosby, please find out about the Regional Center for Advanced Manufacturing with Jeff Frazier. Find out about those efforts. Find out about the ETSU Innovation Lab. Find out about Valley Brook. Those are important things to know. They're assets in this community to help our entrepreneurial efforts, because we want to stop what is happening across Tennessee, and it's awful, and that's the brain drain. Do you know that 80% of our top 10% high school students, 80% of them don't even apply to schools in Tennessee? So that we need to reverse that trend drastically, because we don't want our best and brightest going someplace else, then having bright ideas, then getting funded, and then all of a sudden they're settling down at MIT, they're settling down the research corridor in North Carolina, they're settling down, and the nuclear corridor in South Carolina, they're setting up in Boston. We don't want that. We want to make sure that we keep them here and we support them. But the most important segment, and the one that we're giving the most emphasis in, is the third segment, and that is to expand and to help grow our existing businesses. Now, I believe that Jeff Fleming said this, and also John Campbell said this, about 80% of all new jobs. Actually, the actual numbers are, for 2010 it was 85%, and for 2011 it was 86%. Of all new jobs created are created by expanding our existing businesses. And we should. Why? Because they made the decision to come here in the first place. Or if they started here, they made the decision to stay here. And that's one of the most important reasons that we want to make sure that, that our existing businesses, that we support them, we help them grow. Northeast priorities, just to kind of give you a few of the priorities. We partner with the First Tennessee Development District, Northeast Tennessee Valley Regional Industrial Development Association. That's the Net V RITA that I was telling you about. Also with TVA and AEP, and partner with the local economic development organizations, with partnership with ECD-funded Regional Accelerator and Startup Tennessee, which is our entrepreneurial incubator. ECD staff and local innovation professionals, and to develop a network of angel investors for these new startups. ECD regional staff will attend and participate in 8 local research development educational committee meetings. That's a joke. We do 8 a month. I mean, this is like a yearly goal, and this was a long time ago, and so we're doing that monthly. So we kind of chuckle at that every time it comes up, because once you start getting out in the network, you want to make sure that you stay there, so you stay on top of it, you stay timely. These are some of the things that the Inside Innovation Initiative that the governor wanted to do was Startup Tennessee, which happens to be with our economic, our incubators, regional accelerators, the co-investment fund, which is some of the folks that originally came in, and that's changing every day, but some of the folks originally came in and offered some angel capital to be able to help startups at different levels. And the Governor's Innovation Conference. There is a new program that you used to remember, that the TTDC, Tennessee Technology Development Corporation. It's now morphing into a new organization. It's been revitalized and redone. It's called Launch Tennessee, and there'll be more about that as we go forward. And that it's very, very exciting with innovation. But our Governor's Innovation Conference, which happened this past April in Nashville, was fantastic. It was the best ever, and there was some local companies that went and participated and actually presented there. Some of the 10 trade initiatives. What is 10 trade? 10 trade is an initiative by the governor to want to be able to open up the export market for American goods. You know, we import so much from overseas, especially China. But we want to try to open up more and more. We did a 10 trade trip to China, went to Beijing and Sichuan, and then over to Seoul, South Korea, and did that with the medical technology segment. And some folks from here went for that one. And then we also did one to Mexico with the automotive segment. And we're getting ready to do another one back to Japan with automotive. But you can go online and catch all these at tn.gov/ECD/ whatever you want, whichever program. 10 Trade is this one. Some of the rural economic development initiatives in every single county in the state has a rural component. Every single county, even Shelby County, has a rural component. So one of the things is Tennessee Premier Sites, and your economic developers here know a lot about that, and that just rolled out this spring, and you all have greatly participated in that, and that's going to be a really good thing. Retail, tourism, and agriculture, and the rural business services. Retail, tourism, and tourism is the number 2 industry in the state. It's also the number 2 industry in the nation. Now think about where you live. You live in the state of Franklin, for goodness sakes, for what, 4 years? And then before it became the state of Tennessee, you live in the oldest, most settled part of the state of Tennessee. And your cultural heritage, traditions, and your natural resources are second to none. And so you need to promote that. We're trying every day. The state's trying to do it. Your local communities are. Use that as part of your push with the folks that you talk to. It is a quality of life issue, and people love that. And it really, really shows that your roots go deep, and that's a very important part. Here's some of the people that we do business with. Of course, we got the Appalachian Regional Commission here in East Tennessee. West Tennessee, they don't have it's not in Appalachia, but it's the Delta Regional Authority, and of course the Community Development Block Grant folks. That as counties go forward, the Community Development Block Grants are extremely important to small communities, and even to cities the size of 50,000 like yours. It's extremely important, and especially working with all your federal partners, whether it be EDA, Economic Development Agency, which is a federal agency, USDA Rural Development, ARC, doing CDBGs, which is money that comes out of the federal government that is administered through the state of Tennessee. Those are all very important. Now, one last thing I want to bring up. This doesn't happen overnight, and there are always going to be bumps on the road. And John Campbell brought that forward. And there was one thing that he said, and and I'm glad he did, because you can learn from the bumps in the road, and that's what we're trying to do. And this before he mentioned that when there was a company that was looking here and still is looking here and is looking very closely, and they almost got discounted because someone in Nashville didn't know that there was a resource here that you all have. That is very, very important to learn from, and that's what the governor was trying to do, is learn from that. but there's one thing the state cannot do, and any organization can't do, especially from Nashville. We can't read tea leaves. So, going forward, it is imperative that communities share with the state what your assets are. And if we don't know that it's an asset, then we can't promote it as an asset. So going forward, that hit home with us really, really well, especially with this particular potential customer, is because of that asset that they now know and the community support they got around it. The state is standing there as a partner with the community of Kingsport, with the community of Sullivan County, with networks, with the Northeast Tennessee Development District, which is called the First Tennessee Development District. With all your partners, the state's there with you. I want to just take this opportunity to say what a pleasure it is to work with County Mayor Steve Gotze, with the City Mayor Dennis Phillips, with my friend Richard Venable at Networks, and with Jeff Fleming and Jeff Frazier and Bunkie C and all the folks that make all this happen here in this community. What you're doing is outstanding. It's exemplary, and I cannot tell you how much it means to a community and also to prospects coming into this community to see folks that actually want to pay it forward, give back what you've had all these years and be able to move it forward. And I'll just end with this. One of my favorite inventors, and probably, hopefully yours too, has a great saying. He was a philosopher. And Thomas Edison once said that opportunity is often missed by folks because it's dressed in overalls and looks like work. I think that it's very, very telling. And what I see out here with a Hawaiian shirt and the striped shirts and the ties and the suits is a whole lot of people got overalls under all that stuff. So I really appreciate you putting on your overalls and you coming to work and helping us out, because they all need the help. In the state of Tennessee, the governor appreciates it, Bill Haggerty appreciates it, and I certainly appreciate it. Thank you all very much, and I'd be more than happy to answer questions at the end, the question and answer, or now, just whenever you want to. Thank you all very much. I appreciate you.
You're welcome, brother, sir.
Yes, sir. Let me get my joke right there.
All right, next we'll hear from Richard Venable, who I left off initially. I apologize again. Richard's the Chief Executive Officer for Networks, and will be giving us an overview.
Thank you, Bucky. Let me just say, before I start off, and Jeff's getting me loaded up here, to follow Jeff Fleming and John Campbell, who tell the Kingsport story better than anybody I know, is a little intimidating. And then to follow my friend Aleph is even more intimidating. But I'll do my best to. As I look around this room, I've seen all of you at Rotary or Kiwanis and or some other place. So I'm going to repeat some of the things you've seen. I've got some new things to tell you today. But it's odd that when Bunkie was putting this together, we had a meeting a couple of months ago, Bunkie, and we talked about what we wanted to do. And I actually put together a program called Economic Development 101. Which was Jeff's title today. And I actually did it at Tenova Club in Bristol. And he did it so much better than I did. So I'm happy that you did that, Jeff, because like I say, nobody tells that story better. I'm going to tell a story about a little bit about Aleph's pedigree. He mentioned he left Cocke County at 5 years old, went to Washington, and lived up there through graduate school, and then came to his senses. Well, during that time, many of you remember, and I'll tell you how old he is by telling you this, Aleph has told me about having a dinner guest every week. His father was one of Jimmy Quillen's most trusted confidants, and Aleph told me about burning those steaks for Jimmy about once a week. So he has the pedigree. He has that Northeast Tennessee pedigree that lends itself well to working with us. And really appreciate that, and he's been a long-time friend and was a great mayor of Cocke County. As mentioned, I'm CEO of Networks. I've talked to you before, so I'm going to run through this very quickly, but at the end I'll stop and tell you some relevant information about a program that you might have seen before. Networks was started in 2004. As been mentioned before, when I was a county mayor, Jeanette Blazer and I sat down with the mayor of Bristol at that time, was David Shoemaker, and Tony Massey was the town manager, and we came to an agreement in accordance with the planned growth legislation that was passed in 1999 in Tennessee. Our vision statement, I won't read those to you. You've seen them before, but and it reflects a lot of the things you've heard today. But as I mentioned the Kingsport story, I have the Sullivan County story. And that is representing two diverse cultures in a county. We're siblings. We have sibling rivalries, but we hope we manage those very well. This is our current board of directors. We have new members of the board coming on this year. You'll see 25 members there. You see the on the left is our executive committee and officers, and they meet monthly. The board meets bi-monthly, and we have representatives there from the entire community. This is our staff. We have 2.5 people at Networks now. Jack Lawson is on retirement status, but has remained with us and helped us out. So with 2.5 people, when I show you the number of projects we have, I hope you'll be impressed. These are our partners. And important among those are the 3 IDBs in orange those are the industrial development boards. We work with those every week in the county and they're representing the cities and the counties. And you see Tri-Cities Regional Airport, which I'll mention a little bit later in a project we've got going. We have a lot of partners. The IDBs were established by the General Assembly as ways for the state and local governments to help industrial recruiting. And they can, you see, they can own property and buildings, they can make loans, they can issue revenue bonds. Kingsport has an IDB, Sullivan County has an IDB, and Bristol has one. They are able to operate independently, but Sullivan County can act for any area in the county. So our partnerships, it was created by an intergovernmental agreement, which reflects our bylaws, quite honestly, and those are a list of the things we can do now as Networks. Created in 2004, basically a marketing organization. Now we are a property owner of over 500 acres in 3 parks, and we market those properties. We're involved in workforce development with our county school systems. We have an education initiative led by Keith Wilson at the paper and Dr. Locke since his retirement. Funding is provided by Sullivan County, Bristol, Kingsport at those levels. Our budget at Networks is the same budget we had when it was formed in 2004, and I was county mayor. Now, if I'd known where I was going to end up, I would give them more. But I didn't realize that they would have had a much better budget. But we've been able to accomplish our objectives within the price range that we have to operate with. But our partners are very generous, quite honestly, in funding of Networks. This is one of the unique parts about Networks that you won't see in any other part of the state, and I'm not sure any other part of the country. Revenue generated through investment through Networks by our cities and counties will be split on that same basis. When property comes on the tax rolls in a Bristol Industrial Park, Kingsport will get 31% of that tax rate of Bristol properties. The same will happen if we have when we have a development and it comes on the tax rolls in Gateway and inside the city of Kingsport, Bristol will get 17% of those taxes. That's unique in the state of Tennessee and probably somewhat unique in the nation. Our industrial parks, show you where we spent money. As I say, I'm going to go through this quick. A lot of you have seen it before, but our first purchase was Partnership Park 1 at the airport at the end of the runway in 107 acres in 2005. We issued a revenue anticipation note of $2.5 million for purchase of land and infrastructure. This is that area. You see the new FedEx freight terminal there. You see the Tri-Cities Regional Airport approaches on here on the left. Hawley Road, we have sold 2 plots in that. That's the terminal that's been built out there. It's a $6 to $8 million investment and employs about 100 people, the drivers. The second one was Partnership Park 2 in Bristol, 223 acres. The initial investment was $3.7 million, and that was a Sullivan County bond issue. Kingsport, Bristol did not have to issue the bonds to buy that park, which is inside the city of Bristol. But it was a Sullivan County bond issue. They share the debt. They share the debt service. This is an overview of Partnership Park 2. You'll see Bristol Metals right in the middle of it. Since this is taken, we have built a road with the state help of $2.7 million industrial access road. That's a state grant that Aleph and his counterparts help us get. Moving on, and Bristol Metals, this is the entrance to the park. Bristol Metals is the only business in there right now, and this road will serve. We replaced a road through a trailer park as the entrance to Bristol Metals. We were always worried about accidents happening, so they have a new entrance to their plant, and it's sufficient for the tractor and trailers and that service that area. Partnership Park Road is the name of it. Let's see if. Okay, this is the picture of FedEx Ground in Gateway Commerce Park at the intersections of Interstate 81 and I-26. That was about a $9 million investment, and they have about 120 people working out there. And that was the first sale of property that was owned by Kingsport, purchased in 1986. Kingsport put in the infrastructure for that park. When Networks got into the land business, Networks purchased that from Kingsport and a group of developers, and this was the first project that came in. And again, the state helped us with a state grant of $1.6 million for an industrial development road that came in to service this property. And there's 166 acres. We have 60 acres for development, a total of $2.7 million in that park. And there's the overview of it. You'll see Tri-Cities Crossing, heritage points across Interstate 81, which is being developed now. So we're primed for good distribution center, good warehousing centers, whatever, those things that'll produce jobs. And that's an aerial view and how we've split up that 56 acres that we have, and it's ready to go. Aleph mentioned the Premier Tennessee sites. All three of our parks, we are applying to the state to certify those as premier sites. It's a lengthy process, but once done, it will be some of the prime land in the state of Tennessee. And communicating with Nashville, Aleph, Kingsley will know that, the commissioner will know that, Aleph will make sure of that, so those are some of the things we're doing. So over these years, we've invested $9 million in local revenues, excuse me, $3 million in state help and we've sold 36 acres, $1.3 million over the last 4 years. Now, of course, I don't have to mention we've gone through a recession or a depression, depending on your individual outlook, but you'll see the increase in numbers when I get to the prospects list. But the fact is, we will make, the counties and cities will make money on this, but it is a long-term investment. Let me move on. Other sites marketed. Tri-City Regional Airport. You probably read that they're moving Hamilton Road, which is on the right side of the picture over here, and we're going to have 140 acres adjacent to the airport for industrial development. We think that is the chief asset of Northeast Tennessee and certainly Sullivan County. Networks is leading a marketing program, and we have allocated $35,000 this year to leading a regional marketing program for Tri-Cities Regional Airport. We have called together all the owners of the airport, had our initial meeting, and they are all enthusiastically participating in this marketing program. Washington County, Carter County, Bristol, Virginia came into the room, and I always have some questions how Virginia is going to operate with Tennessee. They're on board. They are on board with enthusiasm. And once we get the airport authority, we'll work closely with Patrick Wilson to develop that with a new road, New Hamilton Road. We've got an air cargo center there. We do have a new hangar built out there, so you all might remember Honda Jet looked at Tri-Cities Airport in 2006. We finished second in that, and there was a statewide article that says the Venables pleased with second place. And that might not be the best publicity in the world, but the fact was, and the reason I was pleased, is we were a world-class airport to have finished in second place, to have been considered for a Honda Jet manufacturing site. And it's just a matter of time till we win that first place. You'll be interested to know that the first They've made 4 jets at Burlington, Greensboro, and the first flight came to Tri-Cities Regional Airport. And they spent 2 days here doing tests on that new small corporate jet. And I had great pride in the fact that they came back over here. They remembered us, and they said they've got the facility, we need to do that. So that $35,000 seed money that the network's putting in, which is your money, will pay for itself over the years. Northeast Tennessee Business Park, that's our home. You'll see on the lower right side, that's the new C&F manufacturing out of Ireland. The Euro situation and the European financial situation has hit them, but when you're in a global economy, you rise and fall with that. But they're progressing. They're near their business plan, and they're growing. On the left, and this is LeClaire Biscuit, and they're a Canadian company, and they are just beginning their 3rd expansion. We don't have any news people in the room, but they will announce within a few weeks. Mayor Phillips will be able to announce a new $13 million expansion in that plant, following up on an $11 million expansion a couple of years ago, and it'll be an additional 30 jobs and grows that tax base for Sullivan County. So that's a real success story for us. We've got an Irish company and a Canadian company across the road from each other. Tri-Cities County Industrial Park. Tug on my when I get to the end. I want to tell you a little bit about this. This is as far away in Sullivan County from Kingsport as you can get. And I had Jack put together a PowerPoint last week, or a couple of weeks ago, for the County Commission. And I made a presentation to the County Commission about the Tri-County Industrial Park. That park began in 1970. Now think about us in the last 4 years having putting $9 million in land. That park began in 1970. We still have 41 acres that we're negotiating with a major aviation company with today that they will buy, and that park will be fully developed. That park has 2,300 jobs in it. I believe it's nearly $250 million in investment, and it's been developed over the last 42 years. So there's no quick turnaround on industrial parks. It's investments of the community in your future. Each one of those parks I showed you eventually will have somewhat the same results. It takes time. Our return on investment in Sullivan County on this park, on 783 acres, I believe, was 138%. But that's over 40 years. So you don't really make money, but you make money in the investment, which has brought in the tax base and those jobs. So here are other sites that we market. Bristol West, which is across from the Bristol Regional Medical Center, the largest employer in Bristol, the old Mason-Dixon building. That's on the bottom left is C&F. Our results, mentioned that Matt was the 3-star program representative with the last administration, and he used to walk us through that process every year. And by virtue of meeting those obligations and those requirements, between 2005 and 2011, we have saved $239,000. There's matching local funds for state grants. It's anywhere from 18% to 22%, and that represents 22% of the funds that the state has given us in grants for building roads, sewers, water systems, whatever. But by virtue of completing a state-required program, we've saved the taxpayers of Sullivan County $239,000. Wanted to throw this up. We've talked a lot about education and workforce this morning. This was an ad that was a few years old. We think we're unique in Northeast Tennessee, and Sullivan County, and the Educate and Grow Scholarship has been one of our best assets that we sell to convince people of our direction. This is where we want to go. This is who we want to be. Jeff, the numbers of degreed people that you talked about, some of that has been a direct result of your city's and your county's investment in the Educate and Grow Scholarship system. You read in the paper that the County Commission put that on the table this year. It didn't scare me too much because I know that they all understand the value of it, and they must go through those processes in county government. But this is one of the best things we do in Sullivan County. This is a report we give to our executive committee every year, every month, and it outlines the projects that we have, what type of project, what its potential is, whether it's committed. You'll see 2 red ones down there. when they say no, we're not coming, we mark them in red. They're green when they're committed. You'll see LeClaire on the top there. Source of our prospects, where do they come from? Where does Network locate these people? Well, in 2010, we generated 23 leads ourselves with existing business. And that goes along with everything that you've heard this morning, that 85 to 86% of all jobs created will be with existing business. So we get out in the community. 2011, we had 26 prospects. State of Tennessee, that reflects the recession we're in, but this year we're already up, I believe, to 14 opportunities. We got 2 on Friday, Matt. Matt sent us 2 opportunities for new businesses, a request for information or a request for a proposal. So we're seeing increased activity there. The TVA and the RITA, you see the numbers. So when I first came to Networks, we were dealing with probably 80 prospects a year. As you can see, the numbers are down, but our local numbers are up with existing business, so that means we're growing at a good rate in Sullivan County. This is our scorecard that we provide our board of directors every month and reflects our goals that we set at the first of the year. These are calendar year goals. This reflects our results last year, the best year in the history of Networks. We had 2 major industries announced location here. One of them was Sprint, who will bring 600 jobs to the Blounteville area, which we couldn't possibly have done without the state's help and leadership on that. But Sprint moved over, and they will. I think the building's about complete now. That has spawned already 3 restaurants have looked at locating in that area for those 600 employees. It's a 24/7 operation, so that's how they grow. But we're proud of that year. Our numbers are down right now, but they're going to take a big boost here in the next couple of weeks. I'm always optimistic. We're going to have some announcements here in a few weeks that will knock your socks off. But the results since 2004, $318 million in investment in Sullivan County, and that broadens that tax base with over 5,040 new jobs. Networks didn't create a one of them. Business created those jobs. We removed obstacles. We gave assistance and allowed those people to grow within our community. Now, multiplying factors, if you use them, each manufacturing job located in a county will generally produce 2.7 other jobs. That may be a convenience store job. It may be a real estate job. But that is the multiplying factor. So that 5,000 jobs could easily convert into 8,000 to 9,000 jobs. Okay, that's as far as I'll go. I would like to say that, end by saying we appreciate the support of our partners, the state. There's been tremendous activity in the city of Bristol and city of Kingsport. You see what's happened here. This is nothing short of amazing what Kingsport has done.